Hello and welcome to the Wool and the Forest podcast. This is a podcast mainly about knitting and woolly crafts and all lovely things made out of wool, some chatter about my work as an indigo textile artist, and in the warmer months, a lot of sewing. But mainly it's a podcast about knitting and my love for this beautiful natural fiber that we get from our sheepy friends, wool. So, welcome one and all to the podcast. If you are finding this episode, I don't know what, I'm calling it the birthday episode. If you are finding this podcast for the first time, welcome to my home on YouTube. So happy to have you here, and I hope you will enjoy the videos that I have to offer. Please go back and look at some of the older podcast episodes and perhaps even the pilot episode for my spin-off series from this podcast, which is called Amble and Knit. So yes, new viewers, welcome. Remember to subscribe so that you do not miss any notifications for anything new that will be released here. I am podcasting after quite a long time, and I will be changing my podcasting schedule going forward. So do remember to subscribe if you would like to stay up to date on what's coming out of this channel. Returning viewers, thank you so much for coming back. I know I'm seeing so many of you, or rather you are seeing my face for the first time in a very long time. And stay till the end if you want to know why that is, why I have been absent from almost all my online spaces for quite a few months now. Stay till the end for our knitting and chatting segment if you'd like to know what has changed. So much has changed, big changes, and big changes to the way in which I will be conducting my online work going forward. But for the rest of this episode, in terms of an episode breakdown, an episode outline, first off, I will be starting with the most important thing I need to do during this episode, during this birthday episode, which is to announce the winner of the StoryMade giveaway from the previous episode. In the last episode, I ran a giveaway for this beautiful, beautiful knitting and story book written by Alexis Hoy. It's called The Story Maker, an illustrated book of knitting, fiber, and fable. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please go back to that previous episode and have a look. It is an absolutely stunning book, full of love for wool and shepherding sheep and for raising sheep and for small flocks, and the importance of family and the importance of ancestral connection, and how knitting and wool continuously brings us that connection in a very tactile and tangible way into our lives. Alexis Hoy has done a beautiful book of not just writing an absolutely gorgeous story in which a knitter is the protagonist, which we can relate to, but also beautiful, beautiful patterns. So I ran a giveaway, and today I will announce the giveaway winner. That's the most important thing I need to do. I'll start with that, and then we will move on to projects on the needles. I have almost nothing to show in terms of finished projects for knitting. I do have finished projects for sewing, which I'll show at the end, and a little bit of yarn acquisition, but it will be a very short episode, mainly because, as I said, there are big changes happening in my life, big things that I have changed about how I conduct my online work. And that means there's also been much less knitting. But what knitting I have done has been beautiful and has filled me with joy and comfort the few moments I've had to knit, and I will share those projects on the needles. And finally, some yarn acquisitions, which I didn't buy, which were a gift. So let's jump straight into the episode. Starting off with the winner for the Story Maker giveaway. Here I have the name of the winner. So the giveaway winner was asked to leave a comment expressing their interest using the hashtag StoryMade giveaway and to be a subscriber of this channel. So if you were within those parameters, you went into the random number generator, and the winner that was chosen was Monica LaRose. Monica LaRose. So I will put your name up on the screen, and of course your name will be in the description box. Please do get in touch with me. The best way to do that is via Instagram, or you can leave a comment for this episode, this video, and say, hello, here's how to get in touch with me. But the best, and I think the most private way to do it would be through a DM on Instagram. And we can get this gorgeous Story Maker book out to you. There we go. We're doing well, even though I haven't podcasted in so long. We are already on to we just got through the most important part of the podcast. I'm doing well. So let's get on with some knitting. Oh my, there's been very little knitting in my life. But as I said, what little I have done has been a delight, as always. So I have only projects on the needles to show you today. And I have this assortment of baskets. As you know, I carry all my knitting in these secondhand baskets that I pick up from the local Goodwill or the local Habitat for Humanity. I have almost no project bags. I have this one tiny project bag, which is sitting here, which I got years ago. And I have a birthday acquisition to show you. I'm calling this episode the birthday episode because I just very recently, like just a few days ago, celebrated my birthday. And it's close enough to my birthday to call it my birthday episode. And it's wonderful that I get to give away something on my birthday. That always feels really nice. So let's start off with this. Ooh, it's quite a bit of noise, isn't it? A bit of a clunk of my phone. I do have to hold on to my phone always. Let's try to put it out of sight, at least out of frame, But I have a very small, almost 11-month-old baby in the house. Yes, little Siddhartha, he's almost 11 now, and he's almost about to walk. But he's a little nursling, and he needs me sometimes. Well, he needs me all the time, but I managed to get away from him for short periods of time. And I need to keep my phone on me so my husband can, let me know when the need arises for mama. So here in this beautiful, beautiful project bag that I got as a birthday present from my lovely, darling husband, my Arik. He was watching one of my podcast episodes. I may have been the last one or the one before the last one, where I speak about the fact that I don't have any project bags and that I've really been wanting to make myself one. So he went ahead and got me for my birthday this gorgeous project bag from a local, small local store in the downtown area. Isn't it so? It's just such a pop of color. I keep it in my home in the most visible possible place since I got it. It is just it just says spring or summer. It's gorgeous. It's made out of a sort of a heavy canvas fabric, real leather stitched handles. And it came with these three sort of like nested in each other, these little bag, slightly larger bag, all sort of nesting in there. So I think these are wonderful for holding projects, holding yarn, holding notions. This one has little mushrooms on it and little carrots and beets and things. So cute. I don't often, we are not big consumers, this whole family. My husband and I are both very much not into the consumption game, and we don't buy new things often. But when we do, we take a lot of joy in it because it's all very new and exciting for us. And they all have different prints. This is a sort of vegetables and garden theme, and this is more flowers. And I'm a May baby, so of course I love flowers. So yes, I love these project bags that have come into my life. And of course they will be very, very useful for multiple things, not just holding projects. Multi-use is the way we go. We're not into single-use things here. But in here, I have stored a project that I would like to show you. Oh my goodness. I just remembered I didn't say anything about what I'm wearing. Probably because it has nothing at all whatsoever to do with knitting. Okay. Let's rewind. Thoroughly disorganized episode. But Let's rewind. So this, I'm wearing a sari because it's sari weather. The sun is out. It has been the most glorious spring I have ever experienced on this beautiful place that we call home, which is the Olympic Peninsula, a far-flung corner of Western Washington, north of the Pacific Northwest of the United States. That's where I'm coming to you from. And if you're new here, and I have never seen a May with so much sunshine, so many flowers blooming. The greens of the trees look greener somehow. We live in the middle of the forest, surrounded by pine, Douglas fir, and cedars, native cedars, and tons and tons and tons of great leaf western maples. And I'm telling you, the green is greener this year somehow. There's been so much rain in the winter. We had an incredible amount of precipitation, for which we are so thankful to Mother Earth for giving us this precious, precious resource of water. So we've had a lot of rain, which means everything is thriving, and the sun, which we hardly ever see in May. So beautiful, beautiful weather. So I am in my saris much earlier in the year than I usually am. Usually I get into my saris towards the end of June, and I wear them for as long as I can, till it gets just simply too cold for it to be practical to wear a sari. So this is a Bengali tant cotton hand woven fabric. There's very little to compare with the fineness of Bengali handlooms. I think the only comparison for me are Sri Lankan handlooms, of which, by the way, I am Sri Lankan. Did I even say my name? I wonder if I even said my name at the beginning of this podcast. So as some of you know, I am from Sri Lanka, and Sri Lankan handlooms are exquisite, but I think closely followed by Bengalis. And Bengali tants are extremely, extremely fine. And this is one of the first things, definitely the first sari, but one of the first hand-woven things that I ever hand-dyed in my first ever indigo vat, like 2 years ago. I had a teeny tiny vat, and it was quite a learning experience dyeing 6 meters of fabric in this tiny vat. It was quite the experience, and I love it. I have never ever since then have I ever managed to get this elusive gray blue. I've come very close in my dye work, but not hit home. So this is a very special sari for me. It's one of the lightest ones as well. It's very pleasant to wear in the summer or in the warmer months. So anyway, back to the knitting. In that beautiful project bag that I showed you, I was holding a On the Needles project. This is another one of my Lopa Pesas that I've been working on. I may have shown you the very sort of beginning cast on in the previous episode. This Lopa Pesa the pattern is designed by Vedis Jonsdottir, from Iceland. She's an Icelandic designer, but she's also the main sort of color designer for Istex, which is the Icelandic brand that makes the iconic Icelandic wool of Lopi. So this is knit. This is another one of her designs. If you've watched any of my episodes, you know how mad I am for all things Icelandic, for the Icelandic sheep. If there was one wool that I could knit with for the rest of my life and not be bored and never want anything else, it would be Icelandic. So Vedis Jonsdottir makes incredibly beautiful patterns, so suitable for the Istex Lopi palette. And this is one of the newer free patterns that Istex released called, I believe it's called Gjof, which means gift in Icelandic. Excuse my pronunciation, of course. So this is knit up in Istex Einband, which is an Icelandic lace weight, and Plötulopi, which is the Icelandic Unspun. One of my greatest love affairs is with this Unspun wool. I love knitting with the combination of Unspun, which is Plötulopi, and Einband. The two create the most exquisite fabric. And as you may have seen a few episodes back, I showed you a Lopa Pesa that I knit for my firstborn daughter with the exact same combination of white plotolopi with a sort of a heathery gray Unspun, which creates a color which is impossible to really pin down. You get this sort of heathered look all around, but it's very subtle because the Unspun blends with the plotolopi because, like they were always made to be together. So yeah, it's gorgeous. It, of course, all of Vedis Johnsdottir's patterns start with this color work on the hem and the color work on the cuff. And I have worked my way through the body up to the arm holes. And I have made a start on one of the sleeves. But I ran out of wool. So I ran out of actually not the plotolopi, but the Unspun. So I stopped. And instead of just going and buying more wool, I carried on with another project until I ran out with that as well. So now it's time to get some wool. So this is something I'm very excited to finish up. I have made some modifications. Well, not really modifications. I'm knitting my size, but in a needle size, a few sizes larger than is recommended in the pattern to get quite a boxy and sort of larger fit, and for the motif to be a bit more enlarged. In fact, this is a little tip I got from one of my favorite Icelandic sort of woolly people, knitting pattern designer, everything. Her name is Helena Magnusson. I'm sure you've heard of her if you know anything about Icelandic knitting. She runs the website and blog that's called The Icelandic Knitter, and I believe she's the Icelandic Knitter on Instagram as well. I have learned so much about working with unspun wool from her because she has been writing about unspun wool for a very, very long time, well before it has become now quite popular in the knitting world. And she wrote this article about designing one of her patterns out of Einband and using one of her own Icelandic lace weight yarns, combining them and knitting them at a very large gauge and getting this beautiful, airy, but extremely warm fabric. And I saw her sample on her website a while back, like 2-3 years ago, and I thought, wow, that's really beautiful. The halo is quite pronounced, the motifs are large, but it just looks so squishy, So I took that tip from her into this Lopa Pesa, and I'm knitting it up at a significantly larger gauge. And so I'm going to end up with a much wider sweater, but I'm following the numbers, the math for the smallest size. So we'll see how it goes. Either way, it's going to be a really comfortable thing to wear this coming winter. I'm sure of it. I have ordered the wool to continue with this. And hopefully I'll be able to, if the weather doesn't get too hot, I'll be able to put some time into it. These are my little knitting markers. I don't use stitch markers. I always love to use, the wool I'm using as my markers. Is something that I learned from one of my knitting heroines, which is Elizabeth Zimmerman. So I don't have any knitting stitch markers. I always believe in using what you already have. I'm always trying to kind of taper things down, refine the process. So I'm loving this bag. I love this project. Vedis Johnsdottir's patterns are always a delight, a joy to knit. Working with Icelandic is my dream anyway. Ooh, and look. Ooh, no, this is more birthday paraphernalia. Very appropriate for my birthday episode. This is my little Gryffindor tin to hold whatever I want. It's empty right now, but I don't know if I'm using buttons or beads or a small pair of scissors, a little, measuring tape, whatever, little bits of yarn to use as markers. They could all be in here, but I'm very proud of my Gryffindor tin. I haven't had Gryffindor paraphernalia ever, and my husband for my birthday bought me a whole bunch of sort of Hogwarts Wizarding World candies and chocolates, and there were these sort of toffees that came in this, but of course, the biggest prize is the tin. So I'm keeping the tin in here as well. So lots of birthday delights in this birthday episode. Let me just take a sip of my delicious cacao. I have taken, over the last few months, I've taken to drinking raw fermented cacao paste daily as part of almost like a ritual. And it's incredible how much I have begun to enjoy it. And I chose this mug. This is this beautiful, beautiful hand-turned, hand-painted, gorgeous ceramic piece of ceramic art made by a local potter. And by local, I don't mean local to the area, but local to the state. Somebody I'd been following on Instagram for years, since my very earliest days. Annie Gitz, very talented potter. And I don't, like I said, we don't buy stuff very often. I buy a special mug once a year, if that. And this year, towards sort of around Christmas time, I gave myself a gift of getting something from her because I've been wanting to support her for so long, and her work is so beautiful. And this is called a dragon's egg mug. And isn't that so appropriate? That beautiful cracked surface and the gold, and it just, I only drink my special cacao in this mug now. It's like, it just seems so perfect, you know, it's like that Aztec gold, you know. Makes me feel quite, you know, I don't know. It's rather a special experience to drink the cacao out of this. So, really lovely drink. So let's move on to the next On the Needles project, which is all I have. So another Einband and Plötulopi and Letlopi project, more Icelandic wool here. This is my Adivasi sock pattern. I've spoken about this in many episodes. I have made several, 1, 2, 3 pairs of Adivasi socks already. This is one I thought I was going to be knitting for myself, but in the end I decided to just make a large sock again for my husband. And I have finished the first leg, or the first sock rather. And once again, because I'm using that same combination of Einband, Icelandic lace weight, Plötulopi, the Icelandic Unspun, and the color work is done with leftover Letlopi that I've had. I mean, I always have leftover Letlopi from doing Lopapesa colorwork yolks. Using some of that in this part of the sock. And the greatest, most fun part about this sock was figuring out this lovely 2-color heel. I really enjoyed making that. It's a simple Flegel heel with a gusset, Flegel heel, and back up the leg with a nice little band of Latvian, or you call it twisted stitches or Latvian braid or whatever you want to call them, and some ribbing to finish off. So it's a toe-up sock. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. This is unblocked, so of course it's going to stretch quite a bit once I block it to his size. He has rather enormous feet. So it's quite the task to knit socks for him, but I do love to see him swaddled in my hand knit socks. So these will be something that will keep him happy. Once I have the wool in my hands, I'll be able to finish that. And yeah, so, you know, happy. I've actually modified my Adivasi sock pattern a little bit. I just kind of, you know, winged it. It's not a pattern I've written, it's just my own pattern that I've knit with a few times, and I doubt it'll ever become a written pattern. I've talked about making it a written pattern before, but never have. So probably never will. Here we go to our last project on the needles that I have to show you, and the last of the knitting to show you. If you watched the last episode, I would have shown you a beautiful, beautiful cowl that I made, my first ever colorwork cowl, using Elizabeth Zimmerman's, what did she call it? A really difficult sweater. She'd called it that, but that's a chapter from her book, The Knitter's Almanac, in which she, oh yes, it's called the Chainmail sweater, but it's in the chapter titled A Really Difficult Sweater, but not really. And she teaches you a way to do color work, which, you know, uses twisting stitches left and right to make your colorwork lines, cross each other. It's a very interesting, very enjoyable way to do colorwork stitching, knitting rather. And I made a cowl, sort of like a cowl swatch or a swatch cowl, because I wanted to make a full size, not really a sweater, more like a cropped short cardigan. And I have been very slowly, and it is very slow going, working away on the main project over the last while. As you can see here, I am not very far up from my cast on. So yes, very slow going, because these the stitch manipulation that happens at each of the crossings is, it's quite complicated. It happens over about 4 steps, where you are making stitches, so you're decreasing, you're crossing, and you're also increasing suddenly to bring your stitch count back up. So all of that means that this takes a long time. It's knitted at a slightly smaller gauge, slightly tighter gauge. But it is gorgeous. So about the yarn, I am happy with the way it's turning out, even though it's slow work. About the yarn, wow, it got really dark suddenly, didn't it? This is going to be a problem during the summer months for me, is that the lighting is changing constantly, and there's no real way to keep it constant. So you'll just have to bear with me, I'm afraid. So carrying on, I've knit this up with Nutiden yarn. So this is Nutiden, or is it Nutiden? I'm not sure. So one of either Nutiden or Nutiden. So there's the Swedish unspun wool, and it has been combined with Icelandic einband. This is becoming my favorite way to knit at all, with unspun combined with Icelandic unspun. So I'm basically changing the shades as I go up. And the foreground pattern of these chainmail cables, if you want to call them that, stays the same. The color of the chainmail cable stays the same, but the background color shifts inside each of those lozenges, if you want to call those. So inside, it goes from light to dark, and then the next segment, it'll go from light to dark, like that. So the plan for this is to make a sort of a very cropped, I would call it a cardigan. So it is going to get steeked up the front, and then I'll probably do some kind of braiding, and then probably just a nice 1 or 2 buttons with some button loops, sort of like those very traditional Norwegian ski sweaters, which you see with the metal buttons and just a loop, a couple, and the rest is open. So I think I will do it like that, or maybe take buttons all the way down. I'm not sure. Either way, I think it's going to be long sleeved, of course, and I think it will be something really smart, really elegant, something to wear when you're going out. And because I'm anticipating being able to get out of the house a bit more this coming winter, I'm hoping I will get some wear from it. So yeah, slow going, very slow going. I doubt this is going to be finished any time in the next few months, but that's what's happening. And to show you some of the wool in isolation, that's the Icelandic einband. That is some Nutiden. And those are the colors being used. And for the background color, I'm using this Nutiden. I have no idea what the names of the shades are. I'm so sorry. And this einband mixed together. So yes. Oh, and of course, for the middle portion, I'm using this gorgeous, oh my goodness, absolutely gorgeous unspun, almost like a plum, same Swedish Nutiden unspun in those middle sections. So just give me a minute. I'm going to open up this curtain and see if we can get more light. So I am back after faffing around with these curtains to try and get some light in, but I think it increases the glare a little too much, so I just let it be. So those are my projects on the needles. Now I will show you some delightful unspun wool that I have received as a gift. Oh my, I'm ending up with a lot of very, very brownish tones in my Nutiden collection. This is one I got from one of their shop updates. a while back, and it seems very similar to this one, but actually now that I'm looking at the two together, I can see that there's a lot more purples and golds and sort of burgundies in this, and this is far more like brown. And I got this absolutely whopping great stack from a dear, dear, sweet lady who also happens to be one of my patrons. Patreon is something I will speak about towards the end. I've changed the way I'm working with Patreon. But look at this. That is a significant stash. I mean, I won't need to get by wool for some time. Beautiful. It's so incredibly soft. From lovely Nanette. Nanette, thank you if you're watching this. Also one of my patrons. So this is not really an acquisition. I would call it a gift. Because as I told you, there's no need for me to buy any wool for the rest of the year. I will not be buying until I have used up everything I have in terms of large quantities of wool. So that's what I have to show you today. And that brings us basically to the end of our knitting segment of the podcast. So if you have zero interest in any other kind of making except for knitting, which I don't think, I don't see why you would. The world is full of beautiful crafts. But if you care for nothing but knitting, you can end the podcast here. But I do have some completed projects to show you because I have been sewing. Oh my, it has been a delight. I've been sewing again and pattern cutting and, pattern cutting meaning drafting flat patterns again, because that is really my background in my textile arts is I come from a woven fabric background and of a deep interest in tailoring techniques and pattern drafting and so that kind of thing. So I've been really enjoying getting back into sewing, and I've been sewing my sweet girls some dresses. And I wanted to show you, this is not everything, but these are some of the cuter ones I have made, and I thought you'd appreciate the cuteness of these dresses. So this sweet little dress is a shirred dress that I made for my 3-year-old daughter for her 3rd birthday. She just turned 3 this year in April. My little baby, my 3rd baby girl. She turned 3 years old. So for her birthday dress, I promised her a handmade birthday dress. So I had this gorgeous stripy green cotton fabric, and I shirred it out because, of course, little girls just look adorable in these shirred yoked dresses. And it's tiered. It's got 2 tiers, and the 3rd tier has this gorgeous white cutwork fabric. Almost, I think it is broderie anglaise. It's almost, I don't think this was like traditional broderie, but it might as well be. It looks the same. So it's cutwork cotton, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And when she wears it, she looks adorable. And I put these little ribbon straps that she can wear, either crossed at the back, tied at the top, and a little bow. So these have been really fun to make. I actually made another version of this for her older sister, my 2nd daughter. And I made another version of it for my oldest daughter, who is getting very tall, and she chose the fabric herself. She went to the local fabric store, the very small local fabric store that we had, and she chose this gorgeous Japanese cotton, and I had some hand woven Sri Lankan cotton in my stash, and she wanted to put the two together into a little tiered and shirred dress, and she wore this actually for Sri Lankan New Year, for Sinhala and Tamil New Year. She looks beautiful in it. She looks alive. It's such a vibrant and happy and lovely color. So I've been doing a lot of shirring, and it's made me really happy to see my girls in their matching shirred dresses. So that's what I have to show you in terms of finished projects. No knitting, but lots of sewing. And I think that brings us to the end of the making segment of the podcast. Now, if you have reached the end, I would like to chat to you a little bit about why I have been away for so long. Let me take a little sip. Oh, lovely. So why I've been away for a while and how I'm changing things on Instagram, on YouTube, on all my online work. So sometime around February, I started to have the realization, and it's a realization that's been coming on very gradually, but it made itself felt very strongly sometime in February, that my greatest and most urgent and most important duty at the moment, really my dharma. Dharma is a very difficult word. It's almost impossible to translate into English. English is a little, it's not accurate enough. It's not systematic enough. It's a bit clunky as a language. So it's a difficult thing to translate a word like dharma from Sanskrit. But dharma is what really describes what brought this clarity to me. That my dharma, my, let's say, duty as a very loose translation, really lay in the home space, and more specifically with my children. And that all of the work I was doing, whether it was YouTube or trying to keep up my textile business via my website or Instagram or whatever, that it was taking me away from where my alignment of energies was really meant to be. So this realization came home very hard, and I knew that I had to change things, and that there were beautiful gifts waiting on the other side of that change. And I basically, within a week or so, I changed my approach to everything. I decided that I was not going to do Patreon anymore, that I would not be bringing out the frequency of videos on YouTube that I had been before, that I would definitely not be spending as much time on Instagram as I had in the past. Instagram has been, letting go of Instagram has been one of the biggest benefits, most tangible benefits that have come into my life. And yeah, it's just, I feel, going off in a little bit of tangent here, I feel in many ways that we live very much in a mother-hating world. I think many of you would agree. A woman-hating world for sure, but also a mother-hating one in which mothers are not valued. They're not protected. They are not supported. And I come from a mother worshipping culture. That's how I was raised. It's this ancient civilization that I'm so honored and privileged to have been born into and brought up in, is essentially at the bottom of everything is a mother worshipping culture, a woman goddess worshipping culture. And to come from that, to see how incredibly devalued women are, and especially mothers are, as if the work of literally growing the next generation of human beings, of raising them in our hearts and homes, it's not very, it's small work. And this narrative that I see in sort of this Western narrative, that a woman should want more than that from life, that fulfillment cannot actually come from being fully involved, fully engaged, fully given to the duty of mothering. That, if you don't do something else, you are somehow less of a woman or less of a human being. It is an insane narrative, and I have no idea how it has become so perniciously rooted in Western culture, and now, spreading around the world as almost like a global culture, global idea. But it feels alien to me, and it is so toxic, and I believe so many of the ills we see in society come from this failure to protect our mothers, to support the unparalleled job mothers do. There is no parallel for it. And I realize that when you live in a society like that, you have to take matters into your own hands, and that I had to consciously retract myself from patterns that I had fallen into unconsciously kind of adopting these ways of thinking without knowing that it was happening. And I realized that, I was spending far too much time, far too much energy, far too much effort putting out content that was not giving me anything in terms of my true duty as a mother and as a wife and as a protector of this household. So I decided to change tact, and I think it has given me an incredible amount of freedom. I feel like this has been quite a long time in the coming. I don't see myself returning to that old schedule of, planning shop updates and doing many, many podcasts, trying to podcast every month or twice a month or any of that. From now on going forwards, I'll be podcasting exactly when I have the opportunity to do so. Until my baby is at least 2 years old, I don't see how realistically the time will open up. Hey. Speaking of motherhood, my little baby just came out. My husband just brought the baby to say, hey, I think he's going to be needing you soon. So yes, this is where my focus is. This is where my energy is. This is where my dharma is most aligned with everything. And I am so happy that I did this. My life, my experience of life itself seems to have expanded over the last 3 months in such a way that I cannot find the words to express to you how drastic the change has been, especially stepping away from Instagram, especially stepping away from sharing as much as I was sharing, especially stepping away from the phone or the camera or the capturing of life constantly. This terrible habits that really many of us have gotten into, but we normalize it. We say for the sake of business or for the sake of selling a few products here and there, for the sake of maintaining our Patreon bases. But you know what? I came to realize that in the end, even at a very material sense, and that is the smallest thing that's driving me, but even if I look at a material sense, even Patreon, even though I was, getting new patrons here and there, I was not finding that the amount of effort, and it does take a lot of effort to put together a podcast like this, to craft a certain kind of experience, not just sit in front of my phone and, talk to you, but just to make it a full and whole experience. It takes effort, it takes time, and every minute away from my babies is a minute that, to me needs to feel like I'm receiving something back in return. And even in the most simple, crass, material, monetary way, it wasn't happening. So I've decided that I will be closing up shop on Patreon, and that going forwards, those of you who enjoy my videos on YouTube can leave me a donation via my Ko-Fi page, which I have attached, linked in the description box below. So you can support me in that way per episode. So if you really enjoy an episode, you can leave me a donation. But Patreon will no longer remain open. I will keep my page open on Patreon for a while, just so I can gather some information from my patrons for some special perks I want to give them at the end of the year when I'm planning a shop update for my indigo textile work. But other than that, it's all getting shut down, and I feel an incredible sense of liberation, freedom, and most importantly, clarity about where my life is going, clarity about where I am doing my highest work, and it's just, life has never felt more effervescent. Life has never felt more bright and alive than it has been for me for the last 3-4 months. So it's happy times, it really is. So I'm going to leave you here and wish you a very happy end to the month of May. I hope you've had a beautiful beginning to your spring, and that summer will be glorious for you all. I know many places we're going into warmer weather, so maybe knitting is not going to be such a, will take center stage, but whatever crafts you get into, I hope your heart is fully in it. And I especially want to take this moment to look at the mothers in this audience, to the women, to my womb sisters, and say, thank you for the work you are doing. It might seem invisible, you might seem shunned and unsupported, that the work is simply being erased everywhere you look, but trust me that this is just a small moment in history. The work you are doing, the dedication, the devotion, the sacrifices that a mother makes is felt for, it's not a season, it's generations that will feel the work you did. It's an entire lineage of men and women who will know that they are here because you chose to be rooted in your duty and to do what was needed, no matter whether you received validation for it or not. So I put my hands together to all the mothers out there and say, I see you and I'm with you. Namaskaram, Ayubon. I will see you in the next podcast. Bye.